Folks, you've been lied to. You've been hearing for weeks now from all of the doubters, all of the so-called panicans, but here is what you are not going to hear anywhere else. Not just that President Trump is winning in Iran, but why he is winning. He came in with 4 goals. He has now achieved 3 of them, and the 4th is on the way. Iran had 3 methods of resistance. President Trump has basically eliminated 2 of them, and the 3rd is on the way. I'll explain it all. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.
So Ben Shapiro just dropped a systematic takedown of Iran's strategic collapse and why Trump's approach worked when everyone said it wouldn't. He's laying out hard data showing Iran's 3 pillars of power have crumbled. Let's break this down.
Regime change is a means. It is not the actual end in a certain sense. If the regime were to change its behavior dramatically, you wouldn't need to change the regime. And yes, if there were to be a regime change, it would achieve pretty much all the goals all at once. But you don't have to achieve all of the goals of the war with regime change. So he did lay out the goals, and so did his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And here they were. 1, destroying the vast majority of Iran's forward military capacity. Done. We have defenestrated their forward military capacity. Their missile base, basically gone. Their Air Force, their Navy, gone. 2, wiping out their defense industrial base. Done. The United States and Israel have wiped out their steel foundries. They have hit all of their missile factories. They have hit their missile launchers. 3, keeping their economy in a stranglehold, depriving them of the means to rebuild. Obviously done. The Iranian economy is defunct. Nothing has been getting in. And finally, 4, ending the Iranian nuclear threat. And that's the one that's pending. So 3 of those 4 have basically been done. It's the Iranian nuclear threat that is the one that's left on the table.
Iran spent 40 years building these capabilities, their missile arsenal, naval forces, and industrial base. Trump and Israel dismantled it in months. The speed of this degradation exposes how hollow Iran's military reputation actually was.
Say the panicans and the liars, but somehow Iran has gotten stronger. This is what we might call the Obi-Wan Kenobi theory of foreign policy. If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Okay, it doesn't work that way in real life. When you strike someone down, they usually stay down. And if they recover, you can strike them down again. The spirit of Iran is not going to teach Luke Skywalker how to blow up the Death Star. That's not how this works.
This stronger through destruction logic died with ISIS in 2019. When al-Qaeda lost territory and leadership, they became weaker, not stronger. Basic military strategy says degraded forces stay degraded unless you let them rebuild.
It is not clear how you get stronger by being alienated from every single country in the region, from Jews to Muslims, or how somehow you're getting stronger if all your leaders are dead and you're walking around as a regime pretending that an impotent comatose dude with no leg is your actual leader. Weekend at Mullah's. Or how you get stronger when your missile launch capacity has been so degraded, so radically degraded, that you're being forced to physically unbury the missile launchers you buried. Right? They buried a bunch of missile launchers to hide them, and now you're being forced to unbury them just so you have something to shoot, and we can see you doing that. And so if there's another round here, we will just blow those up too. Or how you get stronger if your Navy is at the bottom of the sea. Or how you get stronger if your Air Force, which was a bunch of Vietnam-era crap, is now a bunch of shrapnel. How you're stronger when your economy is totally non-existent. When in a few weeks, you're not going to have money to pay your IRGC thugs. But okay, fine.
The IRGC controls Iran's domestic security. Without pay, they can't suppress protests. The missile unburying shows desperation. Buried assets were their insurance policy, now exposed to surveillance and strikes. Iran's playing their last cards.
Staying alive isn't winning unless we're doing the Hunger Games, which we're not. So just to take a similar example, is Cuba winning right now? Is Cuba winning? Cuba, the Cuban communist regime has survived. Are they winning? Or are they on their last legs? Pretty clear they are losing. And so is the regime in Tehran.
Cuba's regime survived 60 years, but controls a failed state with mass emigration. Survival without power projection is strategic death. Iran went from regional hegemon to isolated pariah, watching proxies get eliminated one by one.
So the regime in Tehran had 3 methods of resistance, and they've been building all 3 of these methods of resistance for years and years and years and years. First, the so-called axis of resistance. This would be all of the terror proxies they put all over the region, from Hamas to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, to terror groups in Iraq. Right? All of those members of the axis of resistance were supposed to be Iran's forward army. That was their forward capacity. And since October 7th, 2023, Israel has steadily degraded and or destroyed those terrorists for forward capacity. So Hamas, for example, no forward capacity at this point. They're stuck in a small section of Gaza. They may be trying to rebuild, won't matter. Israel will go in and blow them up again. Hezbollah has been so greatly reduced as a power in the region, as we'll talk about, that now they are in danger of complete evisceration. The Houthis could have gone active any time during this war. After all, they're Iranian allies, and they didn't. And they didn't for a reason. They knew that if they had, they would have been obliterated too. So the terror proxies that Iran had been funding for generations basically defenestrated.
Iran invested over $100 billion in proxy networks since 1979. This was their primary deterrent. Enemies couldn't strike Iran without facing retaliation from multiple fronts. That shield is gone, leaving them exposed and vulnerable.
Okay, so the Strait of Hormuz, they shut that down, right? And them shutting down the Strait of Hormuz was supposed to be their trump card. That was the thing that was supposed to stop everything. And this is where all of the panicans and all of the liars and the people who hate Trump and hate Israel and all the rest, this is where all of them started to say, well, you know, the Iranians, they really showed you, they shut the Strait of Hormuz. They shut the Strait of Hormuz. Well, it's open now. In just a moment, we'll get to President Trump's announcement that the Strait of Hormuz is in fact open for
20% of global oil flows through Hormuz. Experts predicted Iran closing it would crash energy markets and force American retreat. Instead, Trump's counter-blockade turned their trump card into economic suicide. Brilliant strategic reversal.
This process should go very quickly and that most of the points are already negotiated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Trump. Okay, so it's open now. So remember that time when they said that we would never be able to open the strait? We would never be able to. So what did we do? We said, you guys can close the strait, but if you do, we are going to stop all ships going in and out of Iranian ports. And then you just won't have an economy, and then you are dead in the water. And guess what? Guess what? Within a week and a half, they opened the strait. They stopped messing around in the strait because they didn't have the forward operating capacity. Their navy was, in fact, at the bottom of the sea.
Trump understood Iran imports 80% of their refined petroleum. A counter-blockade meant no gas stations, no electricity, economic collapse within weeks. He turned their choke point strategy against them, using their own import dependence.
Quote, now that the Hormuz Strait situation is over, I received a call from NATO asking if we would need some help. I told them to stay away unless they just want to load up their ships with oil. They were useless when needed, a paper tiger, President Trump. Fact. And then he said Iran, with the help of the United States, has removed or is removing all sea mines. Thank you. Again, this deal is not tied in any way to Lebanon, but we will make Lebanon great again. I'll explain why that one is important in just a second. And the president said Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz again. It will no longer be used as a weapon against the world, President Trump. And of course, the reason this happened really is because the Chinese said, we're not doing this game. That's really what happened here, is that the Strait of Hormuz closing hurt the Chinese way worse than it hurt us. The Chinese presumably brought pressure to bear via Pakistan on the Iranians, and the Iranians decided to open the strait.
China imports massive oil volumes through Hormuz daily. Iran miscalculated. They thought hurting America was worth Chinese anger. Beijing's pressure through Pakistan probably sealed Iran's capitulation faster than military strikes alone.
Miad Maleki points out from the Foundation of Defense for Democracies that the 6+ weeks of strikes before the blockade actually made it far more devastating for the regime. 70% of their missile launchers had been destroyed or disabled. 200 air defense systems were struck. The U.S. and Israel had achieved full air superiority within 24 hours. Missile launches plummeted from 350 on day 1 to 50 by day 4. And most importantly, Iran could not reroute its oil over land, which meant that they were done. If they couldn't export their oil by building pipelines in other ways, right? When the Strait of Hormuz shut, Saudi immediately started building pipelines in other directions. Iran could not because we had struck their capacity to do so. Their 2 biggest steel plants shut down. That meant 70% of their steel capacity disrupted. 85% of their petrochemical export capacity was knocked out. The South Pars strikes alone took out 12% of Iran's total gas production. Okay, so what does this mean? Well,
these numbers show systematic industrial destruction. 70% missile capacity, 85% petrochemical exports, 12% gas production eliminated. Compare that to Saudi Arabia rapidly building alternative pipelines. Iran lacks that infrastructure flexibility completely.
The great threat in 2022, if you asked any Israeli, was from the northern border, Hezbollah, possibility of them shooting targeted rockets by the tens of thousands into Israel. And Israel ended that threat and then moved forward to completely end the threat in the middle of this war so that Iran had no forward capacity. So Iran is trying to save face now. Iran is trying to claim that it's not because the president of the United States put a blockade on Iranian ships that they are giving up control of the Strait of Hormuz. They're lying. They're saying that the only reason for the ceasefire is the ceasefire in Lebanon. So simultaneous with this happening, the president of the United States pushed forward a ceasefire in Lebanon. So while all eyes have been on the situation in Iran, Israel has been doing heavy operations in the south of Lebanon to finally once and for all extirpate the threat from the south of Lebanon.
The sequence matters crucially here. Israel eliminated Iran's forward deterrent first, then direct strikes became feasible. This wasn't reckless escalation. It was methodical removal of Iran's ability to retaliate effectively.
And the president says, that's going to go too. That's going to go too. And again, the president is setting some pretty significant lines here. All of the talk about tacoing, the president said from the very beginning, he's been saying it for legitimately 40 years, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And again, when it comes to the sort of rhetorical battle that he's having with Pope Leo, in which the Pope seems far more critical of the president for trying to disarm a terrorist regime that is anti-Jew, anti-Christian, anti-Sunni Muslim, and anti-civilization. The Pope seems to be spending all his time on how upset he is with the president and with Israel, making vaguely worded statements. The president has the moral upper hand there. He does. He does. That's just a reality. Okay, the reality is that the moral side is to oppose the Iranian regime, not to oppose the people trying to stop the Iranian regime.
Iran's complete strategic collapse across all fronts validates Trump's systematic approach. Critics defending a regime that executes protesters, funds terrorism, and threatens nuclear genocide have zero moral authority. The results speak volumes.
And so the Iranians are basically trying to use X to end the war. Masoud Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, and Tucker Carlson guest said, quote, last year at the UN General Assembly, I urged a return to the golden rule of Islamic Christianity and Judaism in human conscience. Do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself. A universal principle so blatantly violated by the Zionist regime. Nuclear weapons for one regime, but war against an entire nation over its peaceful nuclear program. Scientists assassinated in Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Children killed in Manab. Has human conscience died in some world leaders? Okay, so first of all, we have always believed that some regimes should have nukes and some should not. Like the ones we're allied with, we don't really have a problem with them having nukes. It's, terrorist regimes that threaten the obliteration of our allies, both Muslim and Jewish, as well as threats against Europe and the rest of the world. Yeah, that's a problem. The reason that he says this sort of stuff is he figures that he will find allies, which of course he does. And the bizarre coalition of the pseudo-dispossessed continues. I have to say, there's a peculiar schadenfreude for me in watching Ilhan Omar praising Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens. Of course she is. Of course she is. I mean, because they're on the same side. That would be the reason. Ilhan Omar, who has yet to meet an Islamist terror group that she doesn't have some warm feeling for, is out there praising Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens because they're on the same side. Duh.
Iran's weaponizing American polarization through social media while committing massive human rights violations daily. The regime that hangs gay people and shoots female protesters is lecturing America about morality. Peak propaganda absurdity.
They are leveraging the algorithm to attack the United States, President Trump, and Israel, and doing so effectively. Before Operation Epic Fury, many of these Iranian embassy accounts posted sparingly, often fewer than 10 times a day. Then a switch flipped. Data from 69 of the accounts shows a clear surge to between 50 and 200 posts per day, flooding feeds with a nonstop stream of content, according to data compiled by the NCRI. Here is a graph. You can see the daily tweet volume. Look at that gigantic spike that happens at the beginning of the war. Beginning of the war happens, and boom, it just jumps. It just jumps because they are creating an echo chamber in order to take advantage of the algorithm. And you can do this. If you have a bunch of accounts that are all retweeting each other and promoting each other and saying the same thing, you end up with a gigantic spike in particular narratives. Look at the massive spike beginning with the war in the Iranian embassy accounts, weekly keyword mentions of Trump, Israel, or the United States. Look at that gigantic spike. An analysis of 18,246 tweets shows a spike in mentions of those topics beginning in early March. And again, that is juicing the algorithm.
Over 1 million followers reached through coordinated disinformation. This rivals Russian 2016 interference. The timing spike shows sophisticated planning. Iran's information warfare budget probably exceeds many countries' entire military spending.
So it's always very funny to me when Democrats who will spend money on transgender sex surgeries for illegal immigrants, they're like, we have to cut the military spending. That's the thing. It's, but every dollar that's being spent to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is a dollar that could be spent cutting the penis off an illegal immigrant. You guys are brilliant. Here's Hakeem Jeffries doing this routine yesterday.
We are now in the midst of an ongoing war of choice in the Middle East that is reckless and costly, where billions of dollars are being spent every day, while Republicans are unwilling to spend a dime to make life more affordable for the American people.
Okay, so again, this idea that he is determined to make life affordable for the American people, blue cities raise costs. And one of the great lies in American politics is the idea that it is America's military that is our chief cost. That is not true. Even if you include all indirect costs to the federal government of all military spending, wars, Veterans Affairs, DHS anti-terror efforts since 2000 over the last quarter century, that number pencils out to somewhere between $8 and $10 trillion. How about just social welfare spending? Again, that doesn't include state level, just federal social welfare spending. $60 trillion. $60 trillion. But of course, Democrats believe that all of that is the stuff that's justified, not the collective defense, which is the reason you institute a government in the first place. Alrighty.
Defense spending is constitutionally mandated. Social welfare isn't. Democrats who approve trillion-dollar domestic spending suddenly discover fiscal conservatism only when stopping nuclear-armed terrorists. The priorities reveal everything about their worldview.